Hello and welcome. You have found a quiet place and a little time, and that is enough. If it helps, let your eyes rest closed or let your gaze soften on something still in the room. Nothing here needs your hurry. Take a slow breath in, if that feels easy. Let the breath leave you without effort, like mist lifting from a lake at dawn. As you breathe out, let your shoulders soften. You do not have to hold them. Let the weight of the day ease away from your neck, down along your arms, until your hands rest as they are, unclenched, unneeded for a little while. Another breath, if you like. The space between one breath and the next does not ask anything of you. Tonight we travel only in imagination to Ireland's old stories where water and sky meet in long, gentle lines, and where swans glide without needing to explain themselves. We are not rushing towards sorrow as a thing to fear. We are leaning toward a tale that understands melancholy the way evening understands light, slowly with colour that deepens rather than shouts. Picture water first, because this story loves water. A lake lies in the Midlands of Ireland, wide enough to hold sky, shallow enough in places that reeds stand like quiet sentinels. The surface trembles when wind touches it, then stills again. Farther out, the colour darkens to something like ink mixed with blue, as if the lake were remembering night even while day lingers. Along the shore, grass bends without argument. A path may wander through willow and alder, mud soft underfoot after rain, the smell of earth and whetstone rising to meet you. If your mind begins to name tasks or replay conversations, you need not push those thoughts away. Notice them the way you might notice a lamp in a distant window, then return your attention to the water, to the breath, to the slack in your shoulders, and the quiet weight of your body where it rests. Take another slow breath, and with the exhale, imagine your shoulders dropping a fraction more, as if someone kind had placed warm hands there and said, without words, you may rest now. The place where your shoulder meets your arm is a small junction that often carries tension without announcement. You do not have to fix it. Breathe toward it, the way you might breathe warmth into cold hands and let the muscles answer in their own time. In Irish legend, families are sometimes more than flesh. They are songs. They are arguments with fate. They are bonds that outlast a single lifetime. The children of Lear belong to that kind of memory. A story told for centuries, reshaped by tellers, softened at edges where sharpness might wound a listener. For tonight we let the tale be gentle. We let a jealousy become a shadow rather than a storm. We let transformation be strange but not cruel in the telling, because you are here to drift, not to brace. You do not need to remember every name before you rest. Lear is a father figure in the mythic landscape, linked to the sea's old powers, to deep water, to the sound of waves when the world was younger in its stories. His children, Fin Ula, Fi Acra, Cian in many versions, are remembered as bright-hearted, as beloved as the kind of presence that makes a hall feel full. The stepmother, Ifa, in one common telling, is a figure of tragedy as much as trouble. A woman whose story has been passed down with blame and with pity. And tonight, we will not dwell in accusation. We will notice softly how human hearts can break in directions that cause harm, and how stories sometimes give harm a shape that can be spoken about beside a fire, slowly, with room for breath between sentences. Imagine yourself walking the lake shore without haste. The ground underfoot is firm, grass brushes softly, small stones shift with a quiet crunch, then silence returns. The world narrows to the next step, the next slow breath, the gentle loosening of your shoulders once more, as if the water itself were reminding you that you may carry less. The sky above the lake eases from pale gold into rose, then into grey blue, and the fields settle into their night shapes. The horizon is a line drawn faintly forgiving. You might feel fabric soft against your skin, or the weight of a blanket. Perhaps you feel only air moving across your cheek as you breathe. Each sensation can be welcome without being studied. Let them arrive and change slowly without a plot. There is a kindness in arriving somewhere that does not require proof. You do not need a ticket in this telling. You do not need to know every variant of the legend, every scholarly debate about sources. Your presence is enough. Your willingness to drift in thought without straining. Your permission to let the day dissolve a little at the edges. When you imagine the lake again, let it be wide enough that your thoughts do not bump the edges. Let there be silence between sentences in your mind. If a memory rises, let it rise like a bird, circle once and glide away. You can always return to the path, to the breath, to the softening at the tops of the arms where the day used to sit. Swans, in the story, are not only birds. They are grace-given feathers, long necks like questions that do not need answers, white against dark water like moonlight made visible. If you have ever watched a swan move, you know how little hurry it requires to cross distance. It trusts the water to hold it. Tonight, as the tale unfolds, you can trust sound and image to hold you the same way. Long ago, in the time of legends, Lear's children were loved with the kind of love that fills a home with noise and warmth. When their mother passed from the world, the empty place she left was a kind of weather in the house, a season that did not turn quickly. Lear married again, as stories say he did, hoping perhaps to mend what had torn, to give his children a guide, to steady a household that had learned grief too young. Iifa entered the tale as beauty and as complexity. Some tellings make her jealous, some make her wounded, all make her powerful in the wrong direction, until magic, always a dangerous guest, enters the room. For sleep, we need not linger on cruelty's details. We can understand that a spell was cast, that words were spoken which could not be easily taken back, and that 4 children found themselves stepping toward water, not as punishment alone, but as transformation. Bodies changing, feathers where arms had been, voices that could still speak in human tongues on certain occasions. Minds that remembered love even when the world forgot to be kind. If your body has tightened again around the shoulders, breathe and let them widen. There is no test in this arrival. There is only the lake's patience, the evening's softening light, the sense that stories about change can be told without forcing the listener to flinch at every turn. The night deepens by degrees too small to count one by one. You might not notice until the sky feels closer, softer, more like a blanket lowered than a door shut tight. That is the kind of darkness that helps sleep, not the kind that startles. You are allowed to trust it a little. Let your hands rest where they are. Let your feet feel supported whether you are lying down or sitting. The body knows how to soften when the mind stops insisting. Give it a little trust. Another breath. Shoulders wide and loose. The lake holds its water without needing praise. We are nearly at the kind of arrival that needs no gate. The legend of the children of Lear is a long story in its full form. Crossing lakes and seas, touching islands, brushing against faith, when Christianity arrives into the tale's later verses, like bells at the edge of hearing. Tonight we will walk only as far as calm allows, letting centuries pass in phrases rather than in minutes. Letting separation be real without becoming sharp enough to cut. You can feel, if you like, a slight widening in your chest as you breathe, as if the lake had made a little more room inside you. You do not have to hold that feeling. Let it spread and fade, the way light fades, the way stories begin in dimness and become clear only gradually. And now that you have arrived, not with a shout but with a long exhale, we can let the tale unfold in its own time, the way a swan turns on water. There will be water and years, patience and song, but all of it will come gently, like footsteps on soft ground, like someone speaking in the next room, voice low enough that you do not have to lean forward to catch every word. Rest here a moment at the lake's edge, wherever your mind has placed you. Feel the earth steady beneath you. Feel your breath steady within you. When you are ready, the story will continue, not to wound you, but to accompany you, the way still water accompanies the moon, holding a reflection without breaking it. In the house of Lear before the spell, there was laughter, or so we like to imagine. There was the ordinary busyness of young lives learning the world. The children had their tasks and their games, their bonds with one another, their father's sheltering presence. Myth does not always pause to describe breakfast. Yet we can imagine steam rising from a pot, bread torn by kind hands, the small sounds of a family trying to continue after loss. Iifa's presence brought new patterns. In some versions of the tale, she is a figure of the she, touched by otherworldly lineage. In others, she is simply human, with human limits. What the stories agree upon is that love did not arrange itself evenly in her heart. Perhaps she feared being second. Perhaps she heard whispers where none were intended. Perhaps she looked at 4 bright faces and felt herself standing outside a circle she could not enter. We cannot know her private thoughts. We can only remember that hurt people sometimes hurt others, and that myths preserve the outcome long after motives have dissolved into guesswork. When jealousy becomes a story's engine, sleep-friendly tellings can choose to look at it indirectly, as one might look at the moon through thin cloud. Something shifted in Iifa until she sought out those who could weave enchantment into consequence. A druidic figure appears in some texts, a teacher of harsh magic. In others, the power rises from Iifa herself, spoken in a moment she could not retrieve. Either way, the children were led toward a place of water, sometimes named as Loch Der a Var a in the Midlands, and there the world changed. Imagine 4 young people at the edge of something vast. Imagine their trust still partially intact, because betrayal often arrives wearing a familiar face. Imagine the first touch of cold water as instruction rather than welcome, the first sense that their bodies were not obeying familiar rules. The spell, when it lands in the tail, transforms them into swans. White feathers, long throats, hearts that still beat with memory. They lose the shape of human hands, yet they keep, in many versions, the power of human speech and the clarity of human thought. They are not reduced to mere birds. They are stretched into a new kind of being, caught between worlds. Transformation in myth is rarely a single flash. It is a sequence of small astonishments. The way balance shifts when feet are no longer feet. The way the horizon lowers when eyes sit closer to water. The way sound carries differently across feathers. The children discover each other anew in swan shape. Still siblings, still recognizable in gesture and tone, yet altered enough that love must find new paths to travel. That discovery is not a battle scene. It is a quiet adjustment, repeated until it becomes a kind of home. Water birds in the real world teach their young where to find food and how to ride weather. The tale borrows that truth and deepens it. The children must teach each other courage without textbooks, must invent rituals of comfort without anyone else's permission. When night comes down on the lake like a blanket lowered slowly, they draw together. Their bodies are warm against cold. Their voices, when they speak, are small lanterns in darkness. Finn Ula, often the eldest daughter, becomes the voice of the group in many retellings. She speaks with a steadiness that sounds like courage learned overnight. Her brothers cluster in the story's imagination as brothers do, distinct yet linked, names carried like bells. They must learn quickly and slowly at once what it means to float when they once walked, to preen when they once combed hair, to sleep on water when they once slept under wool. Lear, when he discovers what has been done, is grief itself in some tellings, anger in others, but always a father confronted with a wound that cannot be bandaged with ordinary care. Phase fate varies. Exile, transformation into a creature of air or demon of storm. A punishment shaped by the moral grammar of the medieval manuscripts that preserved these tales. For our gentle path, we need not linger on retribution's catalogue. We can note that actions in myth echo until someone tells the story and chooses which echoes to emphasize. In the wider landscape of Irish storytelling, Lear belongs to a family of figures associated with the sea's ancient sovereignty, sometimes tangled in genealogy with Manannán, and other names that modern listeners need not sort tonight. What matters for sleep is the emotional map. A father too large to be comforted by small words, children too changed to be gathered up in arms as once they were. The hall that once rang with voices may fall quiet or fill with a different kind of sound, wind at the door, water somewhere beyond hearing. You might picture the first night after the transformation as a night without useful instructions. Stars reflect on the lake until reflection and sky become hard to separate. The swans learn the etiquette of water, where to tuck a head beneath a wing, how to ride ripples without fighting them, how to be still when stillness is the only kindness available. Every animal skill they acquire is a small poem about adaptation. Every memory of human warmth is an ember kept covered, so it does not blind them with longing. Scholars place the tale among Ireland's three sorrows of storytelling, kin to the fates of the sons of Tir En and the sons of USH Nac, and the long bundles of medieval narrative. You do not need to hold those comparisons in mind. It is enough to know the story earned its place by touching something persistent in listeners. The sense that beauty and loss often travel together, that families can be scattered by forces larger than a single person's unkindness, and that telling can be a form of keeping company with pain until pain loosens its grip. The children, now swans, are bound to the water for a span of years that myth measures in centuries. 300 years on one lake, 300 on a cold sea channel, 300 near an island's rocky shore. Numbers that behave like poetry rather than arithmetic. They are not imprisoned in a cage. They are given the wide misery of distance, the ache of being recognizable to one another, and yet strange to almost everyone else. They swim when storms come. They endure winter. They sing in some versions with a beauty that breaks the hearts of listeners who understand what they are hearing. If you are resting in bed, let your own breathing borrow a little from the rhythm of waves. In, out, nothing forced, nothing to prove. If you are sitting, let your shoulders remember the softness you gave them earlier, the unclenching along the upper back, the freedom at the neck. The first long chapter of their exile is tied to Loch Der Avar, a real place in County Westmeath, where water and sky can look like one pigment on a quiet day. Reeds fringe the shore, birds gather and depart with the seasons. If you visit in imagination, you need not walk the whole circumference. It is enough to stand in one still spot and watch light change, to believe that swans might have circled there for longer than a human life, their white forms doubling in reflection, until eye and mind grew tired of telling which was bird and which was shimmer. Time in myth is not a clock. It is a tide. The children's years on the lake accumulate like silt, like memory that refuses to dissolve. They speak to one another of their father, of the home they cannot enter, of whether forgiveness might ever be possible. Finn-Ula's voice, in the tale's gentle register, keeps the brothers from losing themselves entirely to bitterness. She names hope the way someone might name a small light in a large darkness, not because the room is bright, but because the eye learns, eventually, where to look. On shore, when humans build fires, the swans might see the glow as distant flowers opening in the dark. They might hear laughter that is not for them, or music carried thin across water. Such moments are not cruelty in the story's gentle economy. They are the ordinary distance between lives that no longer share a doorway. The tale asks you not to resent that distance, only to notice how patiently they bear it. How often they choose gentleness when sharpness would be easy. Dawn on the lake arrives with colours so soft they could be mistaken for kindness itself. Mist lifts in thin sheets. The world feels rinsed. If you have ever woken early beside still water, you know the hush that holds everything suspended for a few minutes before the day declares its plans. The swans live inside that hush longer than humans do, because their years are measured in mythic breadth. They learn to treat beauty as a companion rather than a promise. People come to the lake sometimes in the story and hear strange music, or see four swans that seem too aware to be ordinary. Rumor travels the way rumor always has, soft and persistent. Yet the spell's conditions usually keep the children apart from full reunion. They are swans until the world shifts again. They must wait inside their patience. Seasons turn on the lake the way seasons always have. Spring mud and new reeds. Summer warmth hazed with insects. Autumn colours laid like thin cloth over the hills. Winter's glassy edges where water stiffens near the shore. The swans feel these changes on their bodies the way you feel weather on skin, less as drama, more as a long conversation between place and creature. They learn which bays shelter them when wind roughens the surface. They learn the hour when light leans long and the water looks like melted metal. There is companionship in their shared shape. They can drift in formation, a small constellation on the lake, voices lowered to the registers the tale allows. If bitterness visits one of them, the others make room for it without demanding that it leave immediately. Grief in this telling is not a failure. It is weather they pass through together, wing to wing, night after night. If your thoughts drift toward your own family, your own losses, your own moments of feeling changed by something you did not choose, let those thoughts be held gently, not examined like a wound that needs poking. The tale offers companionship, not comparison. You do not have to measure your suffering against a legend. You only have to breathe and let the water of the story carry you forward without hurry. Evening after evening, the lake repeats its simple lessons. Reflection, stillness, the way light leaves without slamming a door. The swans receive those lessons until receiving becomes a kind of peace. Not happiness as the world often sells it, but peace as steadiness, as breath shared, as the decision to remain soft when hardness offers itself as easier. The myth is not finished. The swans still glide. The years still pass in long, slow strokes. Lear's name still sounds like water when spoken softly. Rest in that in-between space, with us a little longer, where the story has room to widen, where the night is large enough for melancholy, without despair, where the next breath comes as reliably as the last. Before the sea calls them onward, linger with the lake one more breath. Its patience, its willingness to hold sky without breaking, It's a reminder that depth does not always announce itself in noise. The children of Lear learned that lesson in feathers night after night, until the lesson became their nature. When the first span of years completes itself, when poetry's arithmetic says 300 years have turned, the swans are no longer bound to the lake's particular silence. The tale moves them with the logic dreams use when they change scene without explanation toward the Sea of Moyle, that stretch of northern water between Ireland and Scotland, where weather writes its own language and cold has a voice. Here the story grows salt, waves lift and fall with a rhythm older than human naming. The swans must learn a new kind of endurance. Not the lake's gentler moods, but the sea's wider moods, the pull of currents, the sting of spray, the loneliness of distance seen from water rather than from shore. In some tellings they huddle through storms, ice on feathers, fear held quietly so as not to frighten each other. In others, the hardship is spoken as plainly as weather, without embellishment, because myth sometimes trusts you to feel what is implied. The Sea of Moyle asks a different patience than a midland lake. Horizons widen until sky and water argue gently about where to draw the line. Gulls wheel. The taste of salt enters every story told here. If you have ever stood on a northern shore and felt wind lean against you, you know the mood even without myth. Exposure, clarity, a kind of honesty that lakes sometimes soften. The swans become students of that honesty, learning how to rest in troughs between waves, how to let fear run through them without freezing their muscles into panic. Coastal names along that stretch of water carry histories of trade and crossing, of people who looked across channels and imagined other lives. The swans in their centuries pass boats and birds and seasons of herring light. Time blurs. Names of kings rise and fall on land like voices in another room. The children remain, feathers rinsed by brine, hearts still counting, in a rhythm older than the kingdoms above. There is a particular melancholy in salt water. It remembers everything and shows nothing clearly except movement. The children of Lear ride that ambiguity. They are neither fully of the land nor of the deep sea. They live at the surface where weather announces itself first. In that in-between, they practice a kind of faith, not spelled out as doctrine, but lived as continuity. The faith that they will still know one another when morning comes, even if morning is only a paler stripe in the sky. Finn Úl A remains the centre of their courage. She divides care among her brothers the way a shepherd might tend a small flock. Watching, adjusting, speaking calm into panic. If you listen to the tale as a meditation on loyalty, you hear less about heroes defeating monsters, and more about presence maintained across time. That kind of love does not shout. It returns, day after day, to the work of staying together. Centuries pass again, measured in wing beats and moon phases, in the slow erosion of memory among humans who once might have known their story firsthand. The world above the water changes. Kingdoms shift in the human realm. Faith shifts too, in the medieval narrative that eventually stitches Christianity into the myth's ending. The swans remain, though their youth in feathered form becomes a kind of eternal present, until the story decides otherwise. Between storms, the sea offers strange calms, glassy intervals where the sky duplicates itself, and the swans appear to swim through clouds. In such moments, the children might forget, for a heartbeat, the weight of years. Then wind returns, practical as ever, reminding them that endurance is not a single heroic act, but a habit assembled from small choices. Rest when rest is possible. Closeness when closeness helps. Speech when speech can mend a fraying thought. Birds pass on migration routes older than maps, the swans watch them come and go, envying nothing, noting everything. There is a quiet education in watching others move freely while you remain bound. Not because you are unworthy, but because a story has placed a fence you cannot see except by touching it. The tale does not ask you to solve that bind. It asks you to witness how they live inside it, without surrendering their souls to hardness. When the second span completes, the tale carries them south and west toward the island of Ian Ish Glu Ara, Ian Ish Glory A, in some anglicised forms, off the coast of County Mayo. Rock and Atlantic Wind replace the earlier chapters' moods. Here they swim closer to the edges of the known map, where monks will one day build and bells will ring with a new kind of timekeeping. The children sense, in some versions, that an ending is no longer an abstract hope, but a shape on the horizon. Mayo's coast, in the living world, is a place of grey-blue light and grass bent horizontal by wind, of small fields and stone walls, of the Atlantic arriving in long, slow folds. You do not need to walk it tonight. You can let the words sketch a shoreline enough for rest. Rock pools holding their own small skies, kelp leaning in water, the sound of surf as steady as breath, if breath were larger. The swans approach such a place not as tourists, but as souls who have learned to measure life in patience. Monastic imagination, when it meets older myth in Irish narrative, often does so without shouting. Holy men arrive as solitaries seeking edges. Literal edges of land where the world thins and prayer feels possible. Bells enter the tale as markers of a community that gathers in stillness. For the swans, bells mean something both familiar and strange. Church sound carried over water, a new language of time dividing night from day with kindness rather than with fear. It is worth pausing softly on the idea that a story can hold three homes for sorrow: a lake's enclosed grief, a sea's expansive grief, and an island's edged grief, where water surrounds and land offers only limited shelter. The children of Lear moved through these landscapes the way a long meditation moves through stages, not because each stage is better, but because each asks something different from the heart. On Inish Glu Ara, rock pools hold miniature skies. Tides rearrange the shore's details without asking. The swans learn the island's moods, the way fog can make the world feel small and safe, the way clear days can expose them to sightlines they might prefer to soften. If monks arrive later in history, they will walk with rhythms unlike warriors, slower, repetitive, grounded in prayer. The tale senses that future before it arrives, the way a listener senses a shift in music before the new melody names itself. There is a special loneliness in islands. Water on every side, yet a person or a swan can still feel lonely. The children of Lear carry that loneliness without turning it into a weapon against one another. They practice a kind of hospitality within their small company. Space for silence, space for sorrow, space for the occasional laugh that surprises them because it remembers childhood. If your shoulders have crept upward again toward your ears, let them slide down on the next slow exhale. There is nothing you must grasp tightly in this part of the tale. The myth has already shown you endurance without asking you to perform it. You are allowed to be a listener only, a body at rest, a mind drifting across centuries in words rather than in lived pain. When Christianity enters the tale's closing movement, it arrives as bells and as a man named Mukai Vog in some versions, a holy figure whose compassion bridges the distance between old magic and new faith. The swans hear bells ring, and the spell's conditions meet their ending. The enchantment releases. But age returns to bodies that have been held outside ordinary time. The children, in certain tellings, crumble gently into dust after baptism, their long trial completed. their souls released from the story's need for them to suffer further. Other versions soften even that ending, but all agree on the shape of melancholy, that relief can arrive alongside loss, that freedom can feel like a final breath shared. Some listeners have heard in that ending a mercy. Others have heard a final cruelty dressed in holiness. A sleep story does not need to settle the debate. It can let the bells be sound without verdict. Let the dust be returned to earth without hurry. Let the soul language of the tale stay larger than any single interpretation. What remains useful is the softness, that after long exile, touch can matter again, even if touch is brief. That a community can witness transformation without turning it into spectacle. You do not have to believe any theological frame literally to feel the emotional truth the narrative leans toward. That some sorrows end with a sound, bells, waves, a last word spoken kindly, and that endings, even gentle ones, leave quiet behind them. The tale of the children of Lear has been painted, sung, and retold in children's books with illustrations of white birds against blue. Those images are not the truth, but they are a kind of kindness. They give the eyes something gentle to hold, while the heart learns slowly. Tonight you have only voice and imagination, which can be softer still, because they ask nothing of you except attention relaxed enough to drift. Think of the water once more, how it receives rain without boasting, how it holds bodies without judgment. The children of Lear, in the end, belong to Ireland's map of feeling. A story about exile and return, about voices that stay human even when the world gives them feathers, about a sister's care that outlasts what cruelty began. When the bells finally speak across the water, you need not picture the scene sharply. Let it be sound only, a vibration that loosens what was held too long, a kindness arriving without the need for anyone to win an argument. That is how this tale prefers to release you. Not with a shout, but with a widening, as if the night itself had opened its hands. If memories rise for you, moments when you waited longer than you thought you could, moments when someone stayed beside you, they may rise like swans taking off, heavy at first, then smooth. You do not have to hold them in the light for long. A glimpse is enough for rest. Irish storytelling has never been only entertainment. It has been a way of holding communal feeling, of teaching resilience without lectures, of letting landscape and animal stand in for emotions too large for a single sentence. The children of Lear inherit that tradition simply by existing in the tale. They are landscape, they are creature, they are family, they are time. Listening to them, you participate in an old courtesy. The courtesy of bearing witness without demanding performance. The night around your own room is wider than you think. The lake in the story rests in the real county of Westmeath. The sea remembers its own names. You do not need to travel there tonight. The tale has brought the water to you in language, in cadence, in the slow widening of your breath as you listen. Let the story's echo fade a little now, like ripples subsiding. We are not climbing toward drama anymore. We are drifting with the current, letting the banks slide past, star by star, breath by breath. What remains of the children of Lear in Irish culture is not only plot, it is a mood carried through schools and songs, through stained glass and simple retellings. You carry none of that obligation tonight. Only the residue of gentleness the tale leaves behind when it is told with care. The water, if you are still with it in imagination, has grown wider and slower. The urgent sounds of shallow waves have given way to a deeper hush, the kind that fills a broad pool where the current almost rests. Here, nothing races. Everything turns gently, slowly, as if the world had decided to think in longer sentences. Your breath can follow that widening. Inhale without grabbing at air. Exhale without pushing it away. Let the space between breaths be a kind of still water too. Untroubled. Sufficient. If your body has found a comfortable position, there is nothing more you need to change. If something itches or aches slightly, you need not battle it. Notice it the way you might notice a leaf touching the surface of a pond, then return to the wide pool of your attention. Soft at the edges. Easy in the middle. Let your hips feel heavy if you are lying down, as if the mattress were water supporting your weight completely. Let your legs be long and loose, feet allowed to fall outward slightly, toes uncurled. Let your belly rise and fall with breath without any special effort. Let your arms rest where they fall, elbows soft, hands empty of purpose. Shoulders again, if they have tightened. Let them melt downward, heavy as stones resting on a soft riverbed, secure and still. Neck long, jaw unclenched, face smooth. The story you heard does not require you to remember every name or every variant. It asked only for your willingness to travel beside it for a while, to let Irish water and Irish dreaming touch your night without demanding anything in return. If your mind wants to revisit the tale, let it revisit in fragments, white feathers catching evening light, a sister's voice steady across years, bells at the edge of hearing. None of these images needs to sharpen into detail. They can blur, the way shoreline blurs in mist, present but gentle. Outside the myth, in the living world, Loch Dair a Bhar a remains a place you could visit with boots and time. The sea of Moyle still moves between coasts. In-ish Glora A still meets the Atlantic with the patience of rock. None of that needs your action now. You have done enough for this day by arriving here, by breathing, by letting your thoughts grow slower. The land itself, beyond any single story, holds a long memory of rain. Fields drain toward streams. Streams braid into lakes. Lakes open toward sea. Nothing in that cycle needs you to manage it tonight. You can belong to the larger pattern simply by resting. Simply by letting your nervous system believe, for a little while, that the world will keep turning without your supervision. Let any remaining tension in your brow smooth away. Let your tongue rest softly in your mouth. Let your eyes, behind closed lids, feel heavy as stones warmed by sun. No effort, no watching, only the gentle permission to stop looking for plot twists. Imagine moonlight, if you like, laying a path across still water. Imagine mist gathering so lightly that the far shore becomes a suggestion rather than a fact. Imagine swans far out on the lake, only visible as pale shapes, proof that beauty can persist without needing an audience. Imagine, too, the sound you are not hearing. Water's steady hush, so constant it becomes a kind of silence. Imagine that silence as a blanket you can pull up to your chin, not to hide from the world, but to meet it more softly without the sharp edges of planning. If thoughts arrive about tomorrow, you need not solve them. Place them on a leaf in your mind and let the current carry them around the bend. They can wait there until morning, if morning asks for them. Many worries in daylight shrink on their own when they are not fed through the night with tension. If sleep is near, you do not have to chase it. Sleep arrives the way the spell finally broke in the tale, sometimes with a sound, sometimes with a softness you cannot name, sometimes after a long waiting you stopped measuring. Let your eyelids feel heavier. Let your thoughts become simple ripples that grow smaller and smaller until the water is glass again. You might notice the slowing of your heartbeat, not as a thing to measure, but as a distant drum becoming gentler. You might notice warmth in your hands as vessels widen and hold less tightly to the day. You might notice the room's small sounds, a house settling, fabric shifting, and find them harmless, even friendly part of the night's texture rather than interruptions. The lake meets the river in the long geography of dreams, and the river does not ask the lake to explain its depth. Your breathing meets the night the same way, without needing an explanation. In and out, a little slower, a little softer. Between breaths, there is a small stillness. Rest in that stillness without naming it. It is enough like a well, dark, deep, dependable. It is enough like a pool where moonlight gathers without breaking. So let the words end here, or let them blur into sound, or let them stop while your breath continues, simple and faithful. The Irish landscape, real and imagined, holds its water. Your room holds you. Sleep when it comes will hold you too, gently without instruction, like still water holding the moon. If you need a last image, let it be simple. 4 pale shapes on dark water, moving as one, leaving the faintest V of ripples behind them until the surface forgets and returns to glass. You do not have to follow them to shore. You can let them go on without you, while you remain here, warm, still, unwinding. If you are still awake, that is not failure. Resting is allowed even when consciousness lingers like a lantern left on low. You can stay in the wide pool of this story, floating, while the world outside your window keeps its own hours. You can let the words become music without meaning, sound without task, a murmur like water over stone. If you prefer silence, you can let the narration end in your mind and remain only with breath. Only with the soft weight of blankets. Only with the knowledge that nothing in this moment requires proof. The children of Lear have already done their work as a story. They have brought you here, to the edge of sleep, to the wide water where thoughts grow thin. You might imagine your room as a small inlet off a larger calm, sheltered from wind, brushed by the same peace that holds pawns at dusk. You might imagine your breath as a tiny current, enough to move a leaf, not enough to disturb depth. You might imagine your mind as surface water, slowly stilling until reflection becomes clear, then irrelevant, then unnecessary. And if you drift, let the drift be gentle. Let dreams be mild, if dreams come. Let the swans swim on in the deep place where myths live, needing neither praise nor proof. Let the bells ring only in the distance, if they ring at all. Let the water go on being water, faithful, patient, older than argument. If you notice one last stray thought, treat it like a feather on the surface. There, then carried aside by a breath of wind. The pool of your attention is wide enough. The night is patient. The body knows how to slide towards sleep, the way a boat slides from shore when the rope loosens. Not all at once, but with a motion that feels inevitable once it begins. There is nothing more you must learn from this episode to deserve rest. There is nothing more you must prove to the lake of your own mind. You listened. That is enough. The children of Lear in the end are not only characters in a story. They are part of Ireland's long practice of turning sorrow into beauty, without pretending sorrow never happened. The night holds you, the story holds you, until you no longer need the words, only the stillness, only the slow current carrying you toward morning without hurry, without noise, without anything but rest. When morning comes, it can come as slowly as this tale prefers. You do not have to meet it with a list. You can meet it the way a lake meets light. Gradually, surface first, then depth, then the whole quiet width of day. That is later. This is now. Now is for drifting, for softening, for letting the shoulders go one last time, for trusting that stories can end gently and still leave sweetness behind. The lake, the sea, and the island keep their places in the world, whether you dream of them or not. You have borrowed their calm for a little while. You can return it with gratitude that does not need words.